Thank you. What motion are we debating on?
Motion 1.
Okay, thank you. All right, then please do well to put your your speaking orders in the text, so it can help us to submit ballots. So my name is Collins. I will be your chair for this round. I welcome my panelists to introduce themselves. Thank you.
Hi guys, I'm Karan. I'll be the trainee for this round. All the best.
Thank
Hi guys, I'm Kriti. I'll be your trainee for this round. All the best.
All right, thank you. So without wasting time, on the motion, this house. Um, just a moment. Okay. So on the motion, okay. On the motion, this house believes that feminism movement should oppose the commercialization of reproduction. I call on the Prime Minister to begin the debate. Here.
Hello, am I clearly audible?
Yes.
Yes, you are audible.
Okay. Just give me a second. I'm going to set up a time. Just give me 5 seconds. Achha, okay, the time is set up. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. So before I begin, my name is Naman Gangar and I'll be going as the Prime Minister for the side government. And my POI preferences are between 5 minutes 30 seconds and the 6th minute. And I would like my POIs to be verbal because I will not be checking chat. And if I do not take your POIs, please do not heckle. So, beginning my debate in 3, in 2, in 1. The
Yeah, here.
motion for today's debate is this House believes that the feminist movement should oppose the commercialization of reproduction. Example, sale of ova, commercialization, some commercial surrogacy, etc. The burden on side government is to prove stakeholder benefits for the vulnerable stakeholders based on principal grounds to establish the belief metric in this debate. Understand the vulnerable stakeholders in this debate. These stakeholders are fourfold. Firstly, primarily the feminist movement. Secondarily, women as a whole. Thirdly, society as a whole. And fourthly, children. Actor is the feminist movement. Now, I would do three things for you in this debate, Chair. That is, firstly, commercialization of reproduction in the status quo, characterizing that and why, what does it look like and why is it bad. Secondly, why should feminist movement be involved in opposing this commercialization, actor incentive. And thirdly, exclusive benefits when feminist movement involves in the status quo, which is known as stakeholder benefit. Doing the first thing, what are the problems in the current status quo? Firstly, exploitation and coercion. How does the commercialization of reproduction look like? Like in exploitation and coercion, economic exploitation, women, particularly from these economically disadvantaged backgrounds, will be coerced into selling their ova or becoming surrogates due to their financial pressures. This is the current status quo. This can lead to exploitation where they are not adequately compensated or are taken advantage of by wealthier individuals and intermediaries. That is what happens in most of these developing countries and with majority of the population, right? That they are desperate and they are being exploited because they're desperate for money. Second point is coercion and consent. There is a concern about whether true consent can be given in situations where women are under significant financial strain. The pressure to alleviate economic hardship may lead to women making decisions they might not otherwise reconsider, making this argument solid because it's principally incorrect to do so. Secondly, health risks. Physical health. Both egg donation and surrogacy carry health risks. Egg retrieval is an invasive procedure and will have serious complications, and pregnancy and childbirth pose risks, especially for surrogates who may not receive comprehensive healthcare as a whole simply because they are from an economically weaker background. Secondly, emotional and psychological health of women as a whole, where surrogacy in particular can have profound emotional and psychological impacts. We all know about post pregnancy depression scenarios, right? Including attachment issues, postpartum depression, exactly. Commodification of women's bodies is my third point, where objectification is the main point. The commercialization of reproductive services will lead to commodification of women's bodies, reducing their value to their reproductive capabilities, treating them as means to an end rather than individuals with inherent dignity. This relates back to the ethical concerns part, where there are broader ethical concerns about treating human reproductive capabilities as commodities that can be bought and sold. Hence, establishing two metrics where the women are being objectified as a whole. Secondly, society inherently having ethical concerns with these commercial practices. Fourthly, inequality and social justice is the point where global inequality or commercial surrogacy often involves women from poorer countries or regions being hired by wealthier individuals. This dynamic will reinforce global equalities and perpetuate a form of neo-colonialism where people are exploiting other people from poorer and background classes, right? Like from third world countries or something. This is a history where people from the West come into third world countries and have tried to have cheap surrogacy aspects, right? Access and equity also is a problem, but the ability to participate in and benefit from the commercialization of reproduction is uneven, often benefiting wealthier individuals and leaving poorer women vulnerable to exploitation. And lastly, lack of regulation. In many places, the industry is poorly regulated, leading to potential abuses, lack of protection for the women involved. This includes insufficient legal frameworks to ensure fair contracts and enforceable rights. In this scenario, why should the feminist movement be involved in the first place? Understand this. Firstly, preventing exploitation and protecting vulnerable women, which is economic vulnerability. Many women who participate in commercial surrogacy sell their ova and do so out of economic necessity, right? Feminism inherently seeks to protect these vulnerable populations from exploitation. By opposing the commercialization of reproduction, the feminist movement can work to prevent economically disadvantaged women from being coerced into such arrangements due to financial desperation. Secondly, exploitation and coercion, where commercialization often leads to situations where women are not fully informed of the risks and are pressured into making decisions, right? So supporting this motion where feminist movement opposes this scenario will protect women, and feminist movement will try to protect these vulnerable women from such exploitation and coercion. Secondly, promoting health and well-being also. Understand that egg donation and surrogacy carry significant health risks. Feminist movement can bring these risks to light and try to prevent these risks from happening to exploited women by opposing this scenario, right? The feminist movement can use their platform to spread awareness regarding this scenario. As for long-term impacts, women who act as
POI.
surrogates or donate eggs may face long-term health consequences. By opposing commercialization, feminists can push for more comprehensive health monitoring and support systems for these women. Yes, your PY, please. Fast. Three.
Yeah, the feminist movement is fundamentally relied on like women's rights. By opposing commercialization, you're taking away women's rights to do what they want with their bodies. What's your alternative?
Sir, what they want with their bodies is not an issue when they do not have the concept of consent involved, right? Because understand, if there is exploitation involved, which is the majority of this case, then you cannot just talk about women's rights in this scenario, because these women's rights are inherently being violated when consent is not involved. Moving on. Thirdly, challenging commodification and objectification, human dignity. Treating women's reproductive capabilities as commodities undermines their dignity and reinforces harmful societal norms that objectify women. These feminist movement has long opposed the objectification of women, and supporting this motion aligns with the global of affirming the women's intrinsic value beyond their reproductive functions. Secondly, ethical concerns as well. Commercialization of reproduction, as I talked about, is a societal ethical concern, right? So when feminist movement opposes this scenario, they're supporting the ethical values of society as a whole and upholding these ethical values as a whole. And advancing social justice and equity is my fourth actor incentive, where global inequality, commercialization surgery involves often women from less wealthy regions being hired by wealthy individuals, perpetuating global inequalities and exploiting socio-economic disparities, right? So in this scenario, it increases equity and fairness, as commercialization of reproduction benefits wealthier individuals as a whole, right? But when feminist movements are opposing this scenario, because it's creating disparities, it can increase equity and fairness simply because it might force certain governments to change their norms. It might force people to call out their governments, call out these wealthy people, and make this sort of commercialization maybe more accessible to people who actually need it rather than people who are exploiting the poor, right? Understand that it also ensures informed consent and autonomy. With true autonomy, for consent to be meaningful, it may be fully informed and free from coercion, right? In commercial arrangements, the power dynamics often define and undermine true autonomy. Supporting this motion aligns with the feminist commitment to ensure that women's choices are genuinely autonomous and unduly influenced by economic pressures. Them talking about the fact that women's rights are being violated is inherently the
Thank
problem.
you, thank you, thank you,
Yes.
thank you, thank you. I
Okay.
thank the
Thank you.
speaker for that fine speech as I welcome the leader of opposition.
I just need 2 minutes.
Okay, I'll be starting my speech in three, two, one. Okay. So, as the leader of opposition, I would like to say that when anything it is not legalized, people get indulged in their underground practices and they start doing it through unfair practices. For example, when alcohol was banned in many states of India, people they started getting involved in the buying and selling of alcohol in underground form, and then low quality alcohol was being formed, which led to people developing health problems. And at the end, it was just a worse scenario in their case, in their side. So if there's a practice which is not harmful, which is not harming someone at the end, and if we legalize it, and if we add some guidelines, rules and regulations in it, it would just be better and benefiting both the parties at the end. If we push on a policy with some ethical guidelines and rules and regulations, the exploitation will not be there. The parties involving in it, they will not exploit the other, and the parties getting involved, like for the women over here, they'll not be exploited. For example, if we provide the females with financial counseling and planning for the people getting involved in this, so that we make sure they're not getting exploited. And of course, if we have some rules like minimum amount will be decided by the government, and
Leader of opposition, are you there? Please pause her timer. I can't hear her.
She seems to have disconnected. Can you just give us a sec?
Okay, please try to get her back.
hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible now.
Okay, sorry for this. I'll be continuing. Yes, so I said the coercion will be more on their side because, of course, it's not legalized. And when it's legalized, we'll have some guidelines, some certain rules and regulation that would ensure that the parties will not be exploiting them, or they will not be exploited. We can have some rules and regulations like financial counseling, planning, some minimum amount will be decided, and we'll make sure that they're not getting exploiting and everything. Again, feminism is about genders having equal rights and opportunities. It's leveling the playing field between the genders and giving individuals the freedom to do what they want. So, if a female wants to get involved in such practices, which is not harming anyone again at the end of the day, it's her right to do so, and government should be no one to stop them. If she gets involved in this, there will be certain benefits for it, like she'll be financially independent. She can support herself from the money earned from this commercialization, and hence, in a way, she'll empower herself. And also, she'll empower other families who are infertile and cannot start families on their own. Infertility really doesn't have any solution to it except for IVF or surrogacy, and surrogacy
UI.
is a better option. Yeah, surrogacy is a better option because IVF always does not
Is it?
guarantee returns. So it would also promote their reproductive autonomy and their choice. And there are many females on this planet who find her femininity in reproduction alone and growing up kids. It's their ideology, it's their point of identification. And reproduction for some females goes on to this extent that they it becomes a point of identification for herself. So if a female, if she finds this empowering in in having kids or in helping others build up their families, then it's certainly benefiting both the parties at the end. And at the end of the day, it's just a good cause for the feminism movement. Yes, PON.
Yes, so my POI is that since you are giving a policy, counter policy, and all of those scenarios, how are you proving exactly that any government will ban this sort of commercialization? Because we're talking about the feminist movement here. So can you please re-clarify how feminist movement plays in all of these scenarios rather than taking a policy?
Yeah, again, as I said, many females, they find this as a point of identification for herself. If she finds this benefiting, if this financially benefits her, and if the other party involved, the family who are getting the services, if they can start a family, if they can receive a child, then of course, if we regularize this practice again, if we have some rules and regulations to ensure that no exploitation is there, then at the end it's benefiting the feminism cause, because femininity over here is getting involved. It's a point of identification for them. That's all I have to say. I rest my case. Thank you.
I thank the speaker for that speech. Welcome, DPM.
Am I clearly audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, so this is MD Tanvir Ahmed. I will be the DPM for this debate, and um, PO is in the 5th and 6th minute. Starting in 3, 2, 1, go. Thank you, Honorable Chair, for passing me the floor. The basic cases that have been come from the leader of the opposition, that was that we will give some regulations, we will do this, we will do that, and this is how we will maintain that she is a woman who is choosing surrogacy should be enough compensated, and each and everything these cases she has stated. But try to understand, this is not a policy debate in the very first place. You have to define principally that why you should choose the commercialization of your reproduction system, where we have been stating so many reasons that why you should not. In that very first place, the strategically and structural debating, opposition has already lost this debate. Still, they are telling you that you are actually finding it beneficial for that surrogate woman as well, and the family and other things as well, the societal aspect. But try to understand, we uphold these rights and creation of a community that values the marginal and vulnerable stakeholders itself. Now try to understand who are these marginal and vulnerable stakeholders in the very first place, and why we should not allow them to do so. Firstly, you imagine that you are a child and you don't know your mother because your father has bought this oval and ovary and whatever it is, and when you are a grown-up man, you want to know that who is your mother, and you don't know that. Let's try to understand how hard your life would be being a child or surviving in this social aspect in this world. This is not even possible, right? So in this particular case, we are talking about the women, right? But still, we are talking about the very marginal, vulnerable stakeholder, which is the children itself, who are getting born with inside this policy, and they have completely forgot this one. Even if we leave that children outside, think about that individual woman who has been commercialized herself. But the thing is, you cannot commercialize yourself on your own, because you don't just go away and you just don't just go out and say that, okay, fuck me. This is not the way you commercialize yourself. This is your society, this is your societal, patriarchal society mostly, who actually commercialize you and who actually sees you in a commodificative way, that the women body is a commodity, and they buy you, they sell you, and this is absolutely inherent in today's world, right? So as the feminist movement or the feminism goal, they have already mentioned that you have to preserve those rights of these women, right? So this is not actually the right of women, that they should allow some men or the patriarchal part of your society to actually rip them apart. Even if they are talking about the inclusiveness of their right, that okay, I have the right to do whatever I want, still you have to think about the social and the vulnerable stakeholder in the very first place. Secondly, if you are choosing yourself that okay, I am being a surrogate mom from myself, then we are not talking about it. We are talking about whenever you are forced or whenever your consent is concerned and you are not getting compensated, and whenever you are actually not getting your health support properly. We are opposing at that particular sector, because as the feminism movement, whenever this is an actor in this debate, we should not allow our women to get surrogated or to get just exploited by a particular society or particular spectrum of people in our society. Coming to the third place, that try to understand, they are providing you a complete rules and regulations and everything, but we are providing you the principle why these women should not get exploited in the very first place. Try to understand what happens in case of surrogacy, in case of western world, and in case of India or South Asian regions. In that extreme cases, they are most likely financial benefits, right? But the thing is, whenever you are including financial benefits inside this sort of thing, and you are not actually valuing the women, that means you are actually commercializing their reproduction system. There comes a comparison between the profitability and the health issues, or the dignity of that particular women. Now you should choose between these two, and whenever you are choosing the profitability, that means you are exploiting that women in any case, in any part of the world, which is not principally right. But in our world, we are actually ensuring the dignity of that women, whatever the financial condition is, whatever her societal aspect is. We are giving her that dignity, which is actually principally correct for that particular woman, and she can do whatever anything, and this society will let her do something for her living. Because this society is, if you are not allowing themselves, or if you are not allowing your society to exploit yourself, you are absolutely out of this rigorous shit, and you are actually focused to do whatever you want to, because that dignity of a women, that what matters to today's world, in feminism world, and in whatever cases. Lastly, they have mentioned one thing, that they are becoming financially independent. But there was a question in my mind, like, are you choosing financially independent over being a dignified person in your society? Because yeah, we know that to this capitalist world, they judge you with your financial condition. But still, if you are a woman and you are not allowing someone to commercialize your reproduction system, we think that principally you are correct, and you can actually go on with the flow, and something will happen in your life which is actually which will actually ensure the beneficialization in your paradigm. Lastly, we are we were opening a vast sector of ethical and legal issues of that children, that society, and that particular women. Try to understand in the very first place that a particular man who is actually buying these oves and creating these babies, and after that, when they are actually being a parent, and like whenever they are following the role of their parenthood, they actually commodifying the role of parenthood as well, because for that children, they are not their original parent, and they are actually doing for something that this child will do something for me in the future. Now try to understand that the original mom, or that surrogate mom who actually gave the children for adoption to that particular family or to that particular parent, she is not getting that benefit, which is absolutely unethical in our world. And we are proposing you this legal issues, this legal proceedings is actually inherent in our world. So we are proposing that from the principal way, we should not suppose to allow the women to commercialize their reproduction. Thank you. Proud to propose.
Thank you, fine speaker from Deputy Prime Minister, as I welcome the Deputy Leader of Opposition. Here, here. DLO, are you here?
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, I'll start in three, two, one. Explaining status quo. For one to not have sufficient bodily autonomy and freedom of choice over oneself is an injustice by the government to not be able to provide it. This motion will further aggravate the issue by selectively taking away the reproductive freedom of women and only women. The feminist movement, since its early inception, has all been about choice, as said by the leader of opposition. Women, just like men, should be given the freedom of choice regarding bodily autonomy. The choice of one to donate their ova should inform them of potential psychological or physiological harm, but should not make should not make it so that they can't make a decision for their own. The negatives associated with the government making laws on individual rights far outweigh any possible claim of exploitation of women, which in itself will only happen if there is no standardization. From time and again, it has been made clear that making something inaccessible is only going to prompt people to find illegal ways of doing it. In the case of banning alcohol, for example, it only made it more challenging for people to procure alcohol and only increased the illegal production and transport of it. This increased the exploitation of people, increasing the actual price of alcohol and making illegal alcohol, which were toxicated in some cases, one that if consumed can be lethal. This sort of branding and activity illegal, which traditionally is a morally questionable act, has made the government even less capable to regulate the field. In the case of places where alcohol was still legal, the government was able to regulate its consumption, procurement, and related activities, and actually make a positive
POI,
socio-economic impact overall. The government, the government's best case scenario is one where reproductive autonomy is being alienated, people stressed, and illegal activities which lead to the actual exploitation of people, as said by the government, exist. People who are from poor socioeconomic backgrounds will be exploited financially, emotionally, and physiologically due to a lack of infrastructure, poor medical and social support, which will be absent. What we should be looking towards is standardizing and having a framework which prevents the exploitation of women. This will bring more effective chance of an economic opportunity for women to be able to support themselves financially, whom without a choice like this, in a dire scenario, will resort to doing this in an illegal fashion in any ways. This will also enable couples who are traditionally reproductively impaired to actually be able to have children for themselves. The policy just has to make sure that neither the donor nor the recipient is being exploited and that the donor is fairly compensated for her work while making sure that the procedure does not harm her psychologically nor physically with an array of instructed medical tests and procedures. Commercializing in itself means that the procedure is plenty understood, the process regulated, and the overall output being positive. In a scenario where people are
POI.
likely to be able to choose for themselves, yes.
Yes, my POI is this
No,
debate. Okay.
I have a negative. I'm not ready to take POIs. In a scenario where people are likely to be able to choose for themselves, the output will be far miles safer than any illegal alternative, which will be more prevalent in the case, which is what the government is promoting. The leader of government pointed out how surrogate mothers will have reproductive complications due to a lack of health care. This is true in the scenario in which the government is promoting, where this act of providing reproductive assistance is opposed and made ostracized. With sufficient help from the feminist movement in the form of making people more informed regarding this act, this can be made into a better scenario for both parties. The mentioning of how this promotes objectification does not carry weight, as in, if men become sperm donors, the act does not de-dignify or objectify men. The same remains true for women. The society needs rapid restructuring, as in people need to change their viewpoints on reproduction in the perspective of women's reproductive capabilities. The movement can and has the necessary capabilities to publicize this in a positive light and make it so that people being involved are not exploited. The act of reproduction carries the same ethical standpoint in case of men and women. Regarding how women are left vulnerable and impacted is due to a lack of reproductive literacy and unfair views on female reproductive system as a whole. Failing to change the
POI.
scenario and making it, I am not taking POIs, and only making it a more taboo topic will only further poison the scenario into making it a more unfavorable scenario. This notion needs to be changed, and the society needs to be reformed into one where women are better empowered and have the choice to be reproductively autonomous while they are being while the field is being restructured and has a certain policy in which women are not vulnerable and impacted in this field. The feminist movement was incepted in to change society where women have the choice, and it is the responsibility of the same to make sure that no one is exploited, even illegally. Government only goes on to rant about how this will negatively impact marginalized women and refuses to elaborate further on how and why, mentioning only the health and social impact. I'd like to clarify and restate the same. Without proper policing, the society right now is where this is bound to happen, where marginalized women are exploited more and more. This cannot and has not been stopped simply because of an alternative. Providing a positive alternative with regulated healthcare and societal support will positively impact marginalized women the most. The DPM goes on to say how this breaches the dignity of women. I'd like to point out in a respectful manner that if the prostitution is in fact a legal choice of work, ethically and morally, and in multiple countries, including India, is legal. The institution where actual exploitation happens is what is illegal. The institution analogous to the same as brothels exists in surrogacy, and that is what this house expects to change. One in a society where the regulation exists, such institutions which exploit women periodically will fail to exist as proper regulations mean they can't exist, and women will be properly compensated. Any advice?
Protected time, bro.
Okay, thank you.
I thank you for that speech. Welcome, government whip.
Audibility check. Am I clearly audible?
Yes, you are.
All right. I'll be starting off within 10 seconds. Just give me a moment to arrange my notes. Starting my speech in the reverse countdown of 3, 2, 1. Multiple core constructives are at issue when it comes to the opposition's case. First of all, this motion cannot accommodate a policy because this is a beliefs that motion, that is a value judgment debate. And most importantly, even if you were to put forward a policy or a model framework and explain to us why that is justified in the first place in establishing anything to change the status quo, you also have to justify to me who is the potential actor that is going to support this, basically actor incentive. And since the model that they have provided the policy, you have to justify to me actor incentives for any particular government to get involved in the same and to allow for commercialization of reproductive organs. Now, the thing is, reproductive organs and the utilization of reproductive organs can fall within the branch or the subcategory of individual rights of human beings, which happens to be the only one and only clash point that side opposition has tried or decided to take down for themselves. But the thing is that there is a core constructive that we also bring from side proposition into this particular debate. Let us talk about then class analysis. The only class that side opposition stands a chance in is the class that there is right to decision making on reproductive body parts on their side that they feel is very important, because the notion of surrogacy emanates or emerges from the whole concept of you can choose what you can do with your body. So if you choose to have a child, then that is a very important constructive and you allow that woman. That is the whole point that side opposition brings to us. But let us talk about the net negative or the trade-off that they bring. The thing is, for the right to decision making that you provide as an individual human right, what you lose is the potential for exploitation that brings into your paradigm. And why is that? Because we established to you within the two speeches that we have been providing in this particular debate why giving this right does not essentially mean that you are giving the choice. Why? Because of this notion, the concept of choice is applicable only when there is no burden of life-changing responsibility added to that choice. Why do I say this? I say this because having a child is a life-changing responsibility, because having huge amounts of money is also a very life-changing consequence. Now, the thing is, when you add a financial burden onto this, add a financial concept onto this is where you make the debate more muddy. And this was established by the Prime Minister in the first speech himself. When he speaks about this, he also talks about or characterizes what the surrogates look like. These are women from the lower lower strata of the community or the lower strata of the society. These are people who are inherently unaware of all of the rights that they must have. These are individuals who also might, to a far greater degree, have financial needs and concerns that require to be meted out in this particular situation. If that is the consideration, then you are not exactly giving them the right to choose. You are essentially giving them a lucrative opportunity, and what you are creating is a potential for exploitation. Why? Because they are not aware, and that is the whole constructive of what a vulnerable stakeholder looks like. And that is where feminism movement comes into play. The way that this motion was shaped was so that we can analyze from the value judgment of a case why social justice movements like feminism movements should be opposing commercialization of surrogacy. Because even if you provide the right to freedom of choice to an individual, what it does, it curbs and creates a potential harm towards how other individuals or a collective group of women who are vulnerable, who can be harmed in this particular status quo, are already facing intrinsic exploitation, and they are also not aware of it. And that is the important harm that you have in the status quo on-site opposition, which is what we try to mitigate. And we tell you that from a social justice movement, even if their model were to stand, even if their government's case were to stand, that the government is going to pass along the policy that these guys have somehow cooked up, then also the fact that there would be social backlash from such similar social justice movements does not get mitigated. Why? Because intrinsically, just allowing the commercialization of this has a simple long-term harm associated with that. Is our reproduction also a point of industrial profit or a business making concept? Because today you have surrogates, individuals working single-handedly, not with a group of other people, but tomorrow some could establish a company. There will be to establish such a process as a business model, that yes, you know what, you come here as a client, we are going to get you surrogates from some third world country, and then this becomes a business model, and we are going to charge a premium for that, and we will have a percentage of profit. So is this what we are looking for in the long-term goal in the near future? And that is what government is propagating, because when that happens, then that definitely raises human rights concerns. Why does it do so? Because the third world countries are characterized by communities that do not have in the first place people who are aware of their rights, who are aware of the value of whatever human life is capable of. And having this sort of a problem in the status quo is intrinsically very bad in a value judgment debate. But even beyond that, what do? You actually also end up harming the core constructive of building a family in the first place. We understand that you can help these people who are couples who cannot conceive to have child and to help them have children. But the thing is, there are other alternative ways to do so, which have also been explored and are very much substantiated within the community at a global forum at large. And the people who can afford surrogacy are the people who can also afford these other alternative methods. And this is where we come into play, that commercialization of such an aspect is a very detrimental thing in this particular world. Why do we say so? We say that surrogacy itself will exist, but let us not commercialize it, or the notion of commercialization of surrogacy itself is bad, because the choice still exists in the developed countries, the choice still exists in the developing nations and in the underdeveloped nations. But the thing is, the potential for harm decreases largely because you are not providing a big model that allows people to actually intrinsically utilize the loopholes. And it is here that they bring forward this constructive narrative that, you know what, when alcohol is banned, then it is done through corruption. Now, the thing is, that already happens as a harm in the status quo. But since you have not justified why governments are an actor in this particular debate, social justice movements can do only as much as advocating for something or the other. And we already know that feminism movement does not advocate for something like illegal trafficking of human body, illegal trafficking of humans, or illegal trafficking of such reproductive organs, or any sort of framework like that. And you already understand that you know that in our side of the paradigm, from side proposition, we've already told you that we cannot support something like that. That sort of a social justice movement can only provide an advocacy for something like that. And since this is not a policy debate, you cannot intrinsically bring forward a policy. You cannot intrinsically compare it with the situation where, alcohol is something that is shipped illegally. And also, human bodies cannot be synonymous to alcohol or some other constructives like that. And that is why in this particular debate, feminism movement has always wanted to protect the exploited feminism community, feministic community. And there, feminism movement is in no place to ban anything, and we don't recognize the government as an actor unless you establish it for us. And we also justify why the feminism movement not only does this, but also opposes the whole notion of why the surrogacy concept cannot be or should not be commercialized in this particular debate, right? And this is why, because you did not justify the involvement of government or state actors, because no state actor would any amount of justifiable incentive will be ever going to pass a policy to uphold the policy in this first place. Now, the final clash, as I said, was the clash on the individual right of a person based on their right to choose can never supersede supersede the potential for exploitation of such rights and choices in the eyes of a social justice movement, since this is a social justice debate. Thank you.
Thank you for that speech, as I welcome the very substantive speaker opposition with.
Yeah, right. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
All right. I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1, go. Panel, notice crucially that opposition's case rests on two things, right? Firstly, they say, oh, the government isn't going to have the power to implement these policies. Only social groups are going to be able to make any substantive change. And secondly, they say, oh, women are more vulnerable on opposition side of the house, right? So what do we have to prove to win this debate? Firstly, we need to prove that in the status quo, this policy already exists. And secondly, we need to prove that we're still better off for women and the feminist movement, even if this policy doesn't function as effectively as they claim to do so, right? So what opposition needed to prove that in a world where commercialization does not exist, they need to show that they're still better off for women and the feminist movement, which they haven't done. So I'll explain in two clashes in my debate, two clashes in my speech. Firstly on principle, and secondly on which world is better for women and the feminist movement, right? Now, in 2012, India banned the commercialization of fertility procedures, right? So what happened then? We saw an increased outflow of women to Nepal because they wanted to undergo these procedures anyway. So note crucially that this ban on commercialization isn't going to stop any exploitation, right? This exploitation is simply going to happen somewhere else. So what we think is that on their side of the house, throughout the debate, we've shown you how on their side of the house, all the impacts that they've shown you exist, but on a much worse scale in this debate. Across my speech, I'll tell you that once again, right? So let's be clear, even if our policy, which by the way already exists in the status quo, we don't need to show you why all these steps that we told you in our first speech do not do work. In fact, because it already exists in the status quo, right? The commercialization of surrogacy procedures already exists. But let's take opposition, let's take government at their best and tell you, even if our policy does not work, here's why we still have a better world, right? Firstly, we give rights and autonomy. Note that this is the very base that the feminist movement stands on, and even if the policy doesn't work to its full extent, we still think that the awareness and impact we generate is significantly stronger, right? We've told you that the comprehensive healthcare services and minimum compensation, partnering with NGOs and support groups, we've told you that all this is beneficial for women, both through medical and reproductive care and mental health support, right? Now, government's only response to this was, oh, you can't give a policy because this isn't a policy debate. Note crucially that this policy already exists in the status quo, right? We don't need to prove to you why all these steps are in the future going to work, because they already exist, right? Government has to come up here and tell us why this policy will not work at all, right? So we didn't really hear an alternative from them as to why this vulnerability and marginalized groups suffer less on their side of the house. Because look, all we fundamentally need to prove to you to win this debate is that on their side of the house, all the impacts that they've told you that impact women and the feminist movement so much exist on their side of the house, and they're much worse, right? So okay, on their first speech on exploitation and coercion, right? Their case fundamentally rests on women are going to be coerced due to financial pressures and no adequate compensation. Firstly, we've told you that the existing policy itself tackles this issue, and even if it doesn't, we've explained to you why this is still better on our side of the house. Secondly, more importantly, why is all this exploitation and vulnerability more likely on their side of the house? Here's why that was. Firstly, without proper regulation, there is a much higher risk of exploitation, coercion, and unethical practices in reproductive donation and surrogacy. We've told you in our first speech, we've told you in our second speech, right? We've told you that marginalized individuals who already face these systematic barriers and vulnerabilities are at a much increased risk on exploitation if any form of commercialization because note crucially that this regulation is going to exist only when there's commercialization, right? If you remove commercialization, the whole process is going to shift underground and shift out of the side of the government, and we think that's fundamentally bad, right? So this, we've told you in our first speech how this leads to things like underground markets and coercion that they so very push on, that the narrative that they push on their side of the house. Thirdly, they come up and in their second speech, they completely ignore the constructives that we've given you, right? We've told you in our first argument why we think rights are so fundamentally important to women and the feminist movement.
POI?
They remove, no, I won't be taking POIs. Thirdly, we've proven to you how these problems are going to exist on their side of the house anyways. Look, their only constructive was on compensation or on dignity, right? Here's why we tackle those on our side of the house. Firstly, on compensation. Note closely that on our side of the house, there's going to be compensation, right? At least there's going to be some sort of compensation, where on their side of the house, they have no real benefits. All they have is an increased risk towards marginalization and all these impacts, right? So when you take their first three speeches across, all these impacts that they've gone on to say are much worse off on their side of the house. That's all we need to prove to win this debate, because we've won the principle. We've shown you why rights are more important, and why the principle that they claim that they exist on their side of the house exists on our side of the house as well, right? They had no response to our arguments on reproductive rights being an important part
POI.
of women's identities. No, I won't be taking the POI. And their last constructive was on dignity, right? Look, let's be clear. We're not taking a we don't see why a commercialization of this process is removing dignity when it already exists in the status quo, right? We're not just because you remove commercialization of the process doesn't mean the process ceases to exist. In the third speech, they went on to say, oh, these policies are still going to exist. We don't have an alternative, but we are only removing the commercialization. Why is there a difference in dignity on their side of the house then? All these points stand on their side of the house as well, right? So on the second clash, which world is better for women? Look, we have real benefits on our side of the house for both marginalized communities and LGBTQ communities, right? We've told you in our second speech that people who cannot, who don't want to adopt, or who
POI,
can't
last chance.
legally, no, I've said no to POI, who can't, uh, who don't have chances to give birth or stuff like that. They are the only ones with real benefits on our side of the house, right? Because no, crucially, there is no incentive on their side of the house to promote legal practices, to have safe practices, right? We on our side of the house and in the status quo, no, crucially, even though we have a policy, this policy is the status quo. On our side of the house, we have a world in which there is more incentive for a safer practice, for a safer commercialization, for surrogacy to be a better practice, and for there to be less underground experiences and stuff like that, right? So finally, we think what we needed to prove across this debate is two things. Firstly, on why all their impacts exist on their side of the house. We've shown you that much. We've shown you why our principle is fundamentally better than theirs, and why their principle exists on our side of the house, right? So we think we take this debate comfortably throughout the course.
I thank the speaker for that speech. Welcome opposition reply. Please do well to resend your speaking orders. I lost it when I disconnected. Prime proposition, do that. Opposition has sent in their own. So government bench, please send your speaking orders. Thank you. Opposition reply, can you do that?
Yes, just 2 minutes, please.
Opposition reply, can you start now?
I'm just having some technical errors. Please give me some time to fix it.
Uh,
All right. If the speaker is not ready, can the second speaker from opposition take the reply speech? We've wasted a lot of time already.
Okay, I'll move forward, no problem. I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so the main points that were presented to us from the government side were that there will be exploitation of the parties involved, people will be forced and taken advantage of, and the parties involved in it are in a desperate position because, of course, they need money. They're from the lower class, as stated by them. So, of course, they'll be in a position where they'll be taken advantage of, they'll be forced, and they'll be unaware of their rights. And also, it would undermine their dignity, ethical concerns would be there. And the second point, the second case that was presented to us from the deputy prime minister's side was the child wouldn't know who their mother is, and the surrogates would remove the dignity. And the third case presented to us by the government whip, was that it was lower class of society who are unaware of their rights, and in the future it would lead it would the commercialization would lead to a business model which is unfair to human rights and dignity. So again, the case from the opposition's house was that if we have a policy, and again, I would like to highlight is that this is the we can have a policy in this debate. There's not a problem in it. If we have a policy where we have rules and regulations, there will be no exploitation involved. And as said by the government, as said by the opposition's with, yeah, sorry for this. I'll continue. I just have some technical errors. Okay, so as said by the opposition whip, if we do not legalize this practice in our place, the exploitation will happen somewhere else. For example, in 2012, uh, it was illegal. It was the business of IVF was illegal. So what we saw was that increased outflow of women to Nepal. So if we do not legalize the practice over here, the illegal it will continue to happen somewhere else. So the whole cycle of exploitation and everything will continue somewhere else. People will move underground. There will be no safety guidelines ensured, and there will be harm to female health instead. So without proper guidelines, there will be higher chances of dangers and harms to both the parties.
I don't know. Is the speaker done or still speaking? Hi, opposition, are you done? Ha, opposition, are you done?
Chair, she exited the meet. I'm not sure exactly.
Okay. Is there any other speaker from opposition here?
I'm here right now.
Conclude your speech, please.
Yes, yes. So yeah, as I was saying, that there was a point from the government side that the surrogacy removes dignity. Now, what I want to highlight over here is the female getting involved in this is here in the very first place over here because she wants to do so, because she wants to avail the benefits of it. So how are we exploiting her dignity if it's her choice at the end, right? And the TPM also goes on to say how this breaches the dignity of women, and I would like to point out again in a respectful manner. It was also stated by the leader of opposition in his speech that if prostitution is in fact a legal choice of work, ethically and morally, and in multiple countries, including in India, it is legal. The institution where actual exploitation happens is what is illegal. The institution analogous to the same as brothels exist in surrogacy, and that is what this house expects to change. That's it. I rest my case. Thank you.
Hello, Chair. Hello, Chair. Am I clearly audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Yes. So I'll be starting my speech in three, in two, in one. Understand, I'm going to give you reasons as to why the entire opposition loses out on this debate. Firstly, people who don't know how to holistically engage in a debate should not debate. Understand the scenario that their core framing, since the first speech itself is wrong. Them talking about banning commercialization and somehow opposition government talking about banning commercialization or commercialization should not exist is exactly the perfect sunk cost fallacy which they're running since the first case itself, because understand that's never the case. Understand the difference between a framing and an argument. Our framing involved exploitation of a woman because that is what the current status quo is. You would be blind if you don't realize it. And secondly, our argument was that why feminist movement as an actor should oppose it, and how this is principally right for the feminist movement to actually oppose this scenario, right? That's exactly why we win over this debate, because them never actually talking about feminist movement apart from women's rights and all of that scenarios. I don't understand how they are winning this case. Understand the scenario that why their policy does not stand is simply because of this lack of framing, right? Because they're providing a policy which who will implement, nobody knows. They never stated a government as an actor. They never stated even feminist movement as an actor. So we don't know who will implement this policy. We don't know what theoretical world they're living in, but their framing is inherently wrong, and that's why they lose. Understand the scenario that how does this single class, the only class about women empowerment and women should do whatever they want with their bodies, does not stand. Why? Because of the characterization of the status quo which I gave, that is exploitation exists, right? Exploitation exists, socio-economic exploitation exists. Understand that in the current status quo, no self-respecting woman with no amount of desperation for money or no amount of desperation for any other sort of incentive would go ahead and like either sell out their capability to reproduce or sell out their eggs, which can lead to lifelong health impacts on that woman. No self-respecting woman is going to do that. They're only going to do that when they are having some amount of desperation, when they're having some amount of problems in their life, is they want an incentive to solve, right? That is exactly what is happening. And if they are even opting for surrogacy, opting to like voluntarily going for surrogacy, they're free to do so in our world. That's why their case is not exclusive. Them saying that our principle somehow exists in their world as well is just like me saying, okay, well, the government op loses this case because they're incompetent, right? But that isn't the complete factor in this scenario. Understand this simple thing that they want surrogacy to be a better practice and all of those scenarios, but how exactly? Because feminism talking about this does not magically make it a better practice, does not magically influence governments to change their policies, right? Understand this, that feminist movement can spread awareness. They cannot just force a government into changing a policy. And if they can force a government, the opposition needed to prove how they do that. And when since they did not do that, we win over this case simply based on the metric that we are bringing a tangible impact to you. What is our tangible impact then? Feminist movement openly opposing this commercialization practices because of the way that it has been going on, meaning economic impacts, meaning exploitation of women is being reduced, commodification of women, this perception of women being commodified, this perception of the act of reproducing being commodified, this is against the inherent value of feminist movement, as I've talked in my first speech. And that's why the feminist movement is more likely and should likely be opposing it. Simple actor incentive. What are the stakeholder benefits there? Already talked about that women can feel later in life when they are having when awareness is getting raised, right? Then society can look forward towards these harms and see these harms and be like, okay, we might have to regulate this commercialization. Regulation exactly occurs in our paradigm rather than them somehow trying to influence the government through magic and nincompoop, right? Understand this scenario that when awareness is being increased in our side of the house, when openly opposing the current commercialization, then only a situation can improve. Then only women's conditions can improve. Then only women as a stakeholder and feminist movement as a stakeholder play in this debate. Thank you. Proud to oppose.
Hello, am I audible? Hello. Hello, am I audible? Hello. Okay, just checking that would the oral ads be given in Google Meet or the Discord? Ads?
I think it's for the chair to decide.
Yeah.
Hi, can you confirm if the trainees can proceed with their OA since we don't have a vote anyways and we are supposed to give an OA before the chair?
Uh, okay, we can start with uh, trainees then.
So
Are you ready?
I'm ready, but I was just reading the message. It says that if I'm giving the OA first, then the chair or the second trainee can't be present in the room or they can't listen to my OA.
I'll leave
Yeah.
when that's it.
Just asking, did you give your verdict to the chair first, like go into the debate room?
Uh, it is supposed to happen that way, but the chair isn't responding or doing anything. And like our verdict,
Just
we
tag
don't
for
know.
once in the Discord. No, someone is missing. Could not tag.
Yeah, I mean, I do get it, but like we don't have a vote anyways. I'll still do that, what you are saying.
Collins, are you here? Okay, guys, I think we can start with the trainee oral arch. I don't think so. Collins is here. I've been texting him over the Discord also.
No, but like we haven't like revealed our result to him, so I don't think we should. Can you like confirm with the OC once this whole
I'll
situation?
just do that.
Yeah, because the the ballot submission should be done before the OA.
Yeah, like that's the exact issue we have.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
hello? Sorry. Can my panelists join me in Discord? Sorry. Let's just start this up.
Chair, just confirming. Did you hear all the speeches?
Yes, I heard. I thought I unmuted. Sorry. So, trainee, please join me in Discord room. Let's have this done. Sorry for that delay. I was just having a bit of network issues, but I listened to all the speeches and I noted everything.
I'm in the delivery room chair.
Please do get the other trainee to join us. Sorry.
Karan, are you here? Just checking, the acceleration will be done on Google Meet, right?
Yes, the OA will be done on Google here.
Yeah, so I would request you to leave the meeting because internet isn't allowed on Google Meet.
No problem. I'm just waiting for the other trainee to join us so we can finish this.
Oh, okay. I'll just click it.
Um, Hi, can you all hear me?
Sorry, Chair, could you repeat? I couldn't see.
Hello? Hello? Am I audible?
Yes.
So, can you all hear me?
Yeah, yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you. We've reached a verdict, and it was a unanimous call, and the debate was given to team proposition. So the first trainee will come deliver his OA, then followed by the second trainee. Myself, the chair, will be the last. So please, debaters, stay back and listen to them. This is going to be very important, so we can rank them very well as CA and know how we are going to break them. Thank you.
Okay, I think we can start and I'll try reaching to Kriti.
Yeah, is it okay if I share the stopwatch? Like I have it on my screen right now.
Haha, sure. Collins, I would request you to leave the room. I'll just give you a message once I'm out.
Just give me a moment. I want to impute the ballot before I leave. Just a moment before you start. Thank you.
Karan, please wait for me.
All right, thank you. So I'm leaving now. Good luck to the trainee. Once you are done, come back and call us on Discord. Thank you.
Cool. Hi guys, Karan this side. I'm the trainee. Am I audible loud and clear to everyone?
Perfectly audible.
Cool. Before my OA, I would like to inform that my OA should be like completed within 10 minutes. And if you guys do not want to listen to my OA after 10 minutes, you guys do have the right to stop me. With that, I would like to begin my OA in 3, 2, and 1. I think it's a very simple OA for me. Gov takes it over by a pretty huge margin because number one, it's a very clear this house believes that motion, which means that Gov both the houses are presented with the burden to provide me benefits and harms as to what is going to happen to the major stakeholders in this debate. Then what do the major stakeholders in this debate then become? The major stakeholders will become the feminists, the women, and the children. I think Gov is the PM is very right to point out that this is not a policy debate, and this is like the feminist movement will act as an actor in this debate in the very first place, which means that the feminist movement needs to take it's in the interest of the feminist movements to go ahead and go ahead and do some activities or go ahead and spread some activism so that this commercialization of reproduction can be stopped. What are the benefits which I receive from Gov, and what are the harms which I receive from Gov? The benefits I receive from Gov is that the characterization is this, that only a woman who is participating in commercialization of the reproductive organs are one, they are financially unstable and they are not financially dependent, which means that which means that the women who are the main character who are the main stakeholders of this debate, the women who are economically weaker, they don't really have a choice, and it is later clarified in the whip speech also, because you can only have the concept of choice only exists when there's not a life altering decision in the way. since these women are like financially dependent, these women don't really have a choice, and therefore these companies or these IVF clinics will exploit them. But number two, on the principal basis also, I think Gav is very right to point out that when commercialization is taking place, you have two choices, either A, of profit, or B, of dignity. When commercialization is taking place, no, these women, since these women are belong to the marginal sections of the society as well, these women don't have the awareness. These women are not fully aware of the harms of the health, of the mental health harms and the physical health harms. These women in the short term may also choose financial incentive, which is profits or some income, over the dignity in the society. I think when gov tells me that the feminist movement is the way in which these women can be, in which awareness can be spread health regarding the health impacts, or regarding the harms which can be caused to women in these like situations when their reproductive organs are commercialized. I think gov gives me majorly three arguments. Number one is that feminism will spread awareness. Number two, feminism will protect the social equality and protect the social justice of these women. I think that is a very important argument, because social justice of women is something which opposition never really engages with. But B, also that equality, there are other sources of livelihood, or there are other sources of livelihood also for these economically underprivileged women, and opposition never really tackles this point also about proposition, wherein they never explicitly tell me that commercialization of reproductive organs is the only way for women to survive in these like harsh times. And since opposition never really tells me these things, I think gov points regarding the benefits of women, the benefits feminism movement provides to the woman stands. What does opposition then give me? I think opposition in the LO speech itself is trying to go ahead and give me push a policy. And even if I concede to the whip speaker, wherein that the policy already exists, it is not enough for opposition to take the case, because in a THBT motion, you need to tell me what are the benefits of this policy existing, which means that the opposition's main burden in this debate was to tell me what are the benefits of commercialization of reproductive organs for the women who are taking part in this activity, as well as for the feminist movement. As soon as I don't ever really get the benefits women have because of this commercialization. The only constructives which I can credit opposition to, and also before that, DL is also very right. DL is also very right to point out that it's not a policy debate. They can't just win. The opposition can't go ahead and win the debate over a policy. I think when that call out occurs, I clearly disregard all the like arguments made about policy in the LO speech itself and the DLO speech also. Then what do I get? What constructive do I get from women in the very first place? Which will then become the main clash, which will then become the only clash in this debate. I think the only constructive which I get from this from the opposition is that it is the right to freedom of choice for these females to take part in these commercialization of their reproductive organs. And when these feminist movements are opposing this commercialization, we take away the freedom of choice for these women who are from the economically weaker sections of the society. And also B, opposition also tells us that legalization will like lead to more will lead to like more will not lead to more exploitation, since there will be certain guidelines in the place. Do note opposition that this debate is not about legalization. And status quo, you guys clearly mentioned that legalization, that in status quo, in the whip speech, that this policy exists in the status quo. When you mention in the whip speech that this policy exists in the status quo, and in your LO speech you mentioned that if this policy is bought in by the government of a state, it will lead to less exploitation. It is a contradictory. You are knifing your own arguments, because you never tell me, like you don't give me an exclusive scenario, exclusive likelihood of analysis as to why commercialization of reproductive organs, like exploitation won't happen through the commercialization of reproductive organs. The clash then the main, because of this I cannot credit this isn't a good enough clash for which I can credit you opposition over proposition. The clash then on the clash then the main clash in this debate is principal argument. What is principally right? The freedom of choice of women, or like to principally to save these women because they are unaware of the consequences, of the severe consequences to their health, to their mental health, to the physical health, and to their dignity in the society. I think I think on government side, then I get a very good argument is that a in the developed countries, the people living in these developed countries, these are the people who are generally exploiting the women living in these third world countries, because these women living in the third world countries would do anything to get out of their poverty stricken state. I think at this point of time, and also at this point of time, government also tells me that feminism, since it's a global phenomena, I think feminism is a much better stakeholder to take care of these women in the third world countries, because a these third world countries are the ones which are unaware. But also b, I think government is very right to point out that, if a child if we are commercializing, if the commercialization isn't we cannot commercialize ourselves, which means that which means that a woman doesn't go ahead and sell her body. Commercialization doesn't happen through her own means. It is a society, or like the corporation or the institute which commercializes the woman, which means that once the woman goes ahead and takes part in donating the reproductive organs, or takes part in this activity of donating their eggs, the other party, the institution which is taking these eggs, that institution will try their best to commercialize this woman, which means that a woman will be unaware also of the which means that a woman will be unaware to a large extent of this commercialization happening to herself in the very first place. Because if the woman gets aware of the commercialization, she would try her best to stay away from these practices. But again, DPM clearly explains to me why commercialization happens on a societal level, a societal level, and it's not the woman who commercializes herself. And I think that is why the main clash about which is principally right or wrong, I think principally I credit the whole clash to the gov bench, because they give me enough analysis as to why women are unaware, but and also be by society as a whole are following this commercialization. I think when freedom of choice, or by on freedom of choice also, in the whip speech I get substantial analysis as to why, the concept of choice doesn't exist in the very first place, because of this woman, on this woman, because like they do not have any other means. And if donating their eggs is the easiest, and like is the easiest way on the face value to get some money, they will go ahead and do it, because they don't have the enough awareness also about the long term consequences of donating their eggs, be it physical or mental. Also, I think, yeah, I think a lot of opposition's case was like solidified in the whip speech. The whip tried to sway ahead this debate that, this policy that already exists, sway ahead this debate in the form in like the opposition's favor. But then again, I think all the arguments which came in the whip speech that, without regulation much risk is involved, or policies already exist, I think that came too late in the debate, and it was like a characterization which was lacking in the first two speeches of opposition. Also, there were many more benefits given by the government, which is that, children are better off, because a child doesn't know their mother. It has a social impact. Government or also provides education for women, which means that that's all for me. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. You can leave. I'll add to.
Is there a second trainee in this round?
Yes, we do have one more drink. Karan, please leave the room.
Hi, can Karan please leave the meet?
I am not sure because the trainees. Okay, then it's cool. I guess if the chair is okay with that, you can.
Okay, fine. Um, I'll start on the self count of three, two, one. Hello, everyone. I was your trainee for this debate. I'll start with the verdict, which is already given by the chair. The motion stands. The Gov takes the debate. I'll move on to the points that were presented by each side, that is the government and the opposition. So, there were three main points from each side that I could take up from the debate. The government first talks about the stakeholders in four folds, that is the marginalized women, the society, and the children. And since there was no rebuttal from the opposition, I believe that they agreed on the stakeholders that were provided by the government side, right? Secondly, the government talks about exploitation and the problems in this current status quo. That was that the women that turn up or resort to surrogacy and selling over in the first place are the women from poor background that have poor finances, and they take up to these measures in order to deal with their in order to deal with their finances, right? They are not aware about the health risks and the mental risks that these process poses, and are not extremely aware about them. Thirdly, they talk about the effects on children, that it's not fair for the that it's not mentally or that it's not mentally fair for the children to not know who their real parents are. This was explained with the example of a child being born by selling ova, and he or she being not aware about who his or her mother is, right? Moving on to the points that were presented by the opposition again presents 3 points. They first talk about that how when something is made illegal, people resort to unfair means in order to perform the practice anyways. And in government's paradigm, since they're making commercialization illegal, people would resort to unfair means anyways in order to perform it. The example of alcohol trade was given. Secondly, they provide a policy in which they talk that rules and guidelines should be made, and people will be and women especially would be educated about the consequences and the procedures that these two processes pose. Thirdly, they also talk about how compensation will be provided, and this would in turn make the females financially independent. Thirdly, they talk about female autonomy and how females have the right on their body and have the right to do whatever they want with their body, and government cannot snatch away this right from the females, right? Now how now some general feedback about the debate was from the government. Please correct me if I'm wrong, because I did miss some part from the PM speech. I got disconnected. There was no proper definition about what they mean by feminism, right? And the LO did not, the opposition did not either take up to this or define feminism, at least. So firstly, secondly, with opposition, what I think lagged was this was a how it believes that debate. There was no policy required. However, they did give a policy, but they want to mention that this policy already exists in the status quo, but there was no mechanization as to how does this policy exist in the first place. And secondly, how, since they have presented a policy, it's their burden to tell us, the adjudicators, as to how are they planning on implementing this policy in the first place, and there was no argument about that either. And I believe that there was some confusion in both the paradigms, since the government, they were basically talking about women who are forced into surrogacy and overselling, and the opposition was talking about women in general, and these two cannot be directly compared, if you understand what I mean. Fourth, moving on to the clashes, there was one major clash that I could identify in this debate, which was the clash on body rights. Now, this was brought up by the government when they talk about that women who resort to surrogacy and overselling in the first place are women from poor background who need the money which they gain from this for poor to deal with their poor finances, right? They do not know the health risks and hazards that these process pose, and hence in other words it's their exploitation, right? To which the opposition says that that women have the right to their body autonomy, they can do whatever they want, and government in their paradigm is basically snatching away this right from the women, and hence it's not fair for the women, and it's again against feminism. Now the government clearly meant, what opposition needs to understand is that the government, they have clearly mentioned that when they talk about exploitation, they are talking about females who are being forced into these processes, right, into surrogacy and overselling. They're not talking about people who are voluntarily resorting to these practices. They're talking about women who are being forced into these practices, right? and hence these women, and hence even though the opposition, like I've already mentioned, did come up with a policy that these females would be educated, there was no argument as to how they are planning on implementing it, and as to how they're planning on implementing it. Hence what we have with it at the end of the day is female being uneducated about the health risks and the hazards that these process pose. And hence I give this clash to the government. Before I move on, are there any POIs from either side? Okay, seeing none, I'll move on. Now, how I think that the opposition could have taken up the debate was the burden on each side was to prove that the stakeholders that were defined by the government were better off in their paradigm, right? Whilst on the opposition, there were substantives on why the generalized women, the women, and the society would be better off in their paradigm. There were no points as to why the children that are brought up through these procedures would be better off in their paradigm, right? The government did mention the point about children being about how children being unaware about who their real parents are would pose as a source of mental stress and trauma for the children. And there was no rebuttal from the government, from the opposition side, as to why these children would be better off in their paradigm. And had they had rebutted this point, it would have they would have talked about how all the stakeholders would be better off in their paradigm and would have easily taken over the debate. That's all from my side. Thank you.
Hello.
Yeah, I've informed the chair also. He is joining in a second.
Okay, cool.
Hi, am I audible? Hello,
Loud and clear.
thank you. Opposition, are you here? Proposition, are you here?
Yeah, Gov side is here.
Thank you. Government bench, are you here?
That's good.
Yes, we are.
Government is here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for what was a fine round. Thank you all for the debate. So I'm going to do this. Firstly, I'll start with general comments and feedback. Then I will move down to the reasons why the rankings were what it is, and then the justification. Firstly, on general feedback, a few emotions like this, you don't need to apply a lot of unresponded nuances, especially when what you need to do is to either support a particular thing or push for a narrative that you feel this is obviously what you need to engage in. Secondly, I feel there was a lot of matter dumping that needed to be responded to within the debate. The first is the motion truly applicable when it comes to kind of policies that some teams were pushing within the debate? Because the motion says this house believes the feminist movement should oppose the commercialization of reproduction. Now, if you want to actually promote a world where individuals' autonomy are going to be respected, how are you going to ensure that people don't abuse those sort of autonomies? Because these are things that needs to be engaged in as it regards how the motion will be adjudicated or how you are going to respond to it. The next thing is, what are the levels of this kind of autonomy and when should the autonomy be respected? We needed to have a response to show why when it comes to certain consequences, at what particular point should this autonomy be protected, and at what level does an individual have the right to determine what they do to themselves? And then the last thing, I felt like there was a lot of argument that was not responded to, and that is essentially from what the government bench were pushing for, which I felt teams should try as much as possible to cover all aspects of loopholes as regards how they respond or how they tackle some argument that may be thrown to them in this debate. So let's move into the justification. From Prime Minister or from the government bench, we heard a lot of things. The first thing is to talk about how this kind of things makes women vulnerable, how it doesn't in any way have any essential exclusive benefits, and how the problem it creates in the status quo is worse off. Secondly, how women can be coerced into selling their organs as a source of survival mechanism. Thirdly, how it poses physical health risk and the issues associated with it, and how at the most of it all it's going to lead to emotional psychological condition of women, especially people who have decided to commodify themselves. Opposition says that feminism has to do with gender rights and how individuals are allowed to utilize and maximize that right. At a particular point where we understand that surrogacy is a better option and also helps to improve the fertility autonomy of women, it becomes very clear that we don't refuse them this aspect of right, as they have right to their bodily autonomy, and therefore it is an opportunity for them to enhance life and improve something and what is worth doing. Also, it serves as a form of benefits which helps feminism act to increase their self-reliance and help individuals to become economically important. But the problem I have with those arguments of self-right, self-autonomy and the rest of them is that one, government bench already pointed out that there are persons in the society who are vulnerable and they are ready to risk their dignity to any form of vulnerability, especially the ones that may cost their life. They then go on to talk about how most of these individuals may not be able to psychologically deal with the after effect of this surrogacy and all of this thing because there are chances that they are going to have children, and when these children comes and they are not able to cater or have what it takes to take care of them, the consequences becomes more. I agree with opposition where opposition talked about the fact that we should allow people to have a freedom of thought to their own self and what they want, that everybody should be given a choice to their own life and how they want to deal with the consequences associated with it. For example, using the alcohol and the rest of them. But the problem here is that the very fact that individuals in the society, even when they have this aspect of their own life and their own choices, people tend to abuse it, thereby risking more things that is going to be worse on their path. It then becomes unclear on what extent of marginalization and on what extent are you going to ensure that you don't give people the opportunity to abuse these things that is going to further ridicule them and reduce them to a world of more problematic situation that will be worse on their side. I didn't get any response from opposition to show to me how they are likely going to ensure that this doesn't happen or this does not become the problem, especially when you decide to give people that self autonomy to determine what they do to themselves. They don't directly show to me how they are likely going to mitigate against some futuristic harms that is going to happen to people when individuals are encouraged to live the way that they found it fit and they zoom it possible. Because of lack of these responses and engagement from opposition, it was unclear to me how they are likely going to ensure that individuals will have the autonomy to decide what they want to do with their own life. Especially when we talk about the fact that as it affects women and themselves, I don't get how opposition mitigates against this harm, and the way this actually tries to solve the problem. I think that is why, at the end of the day, I felt, even though that op had some clear things that makes them respond to some of the argument, but then the impact analysis on a weighing level is much more better on opposite on proposition, as they directly show to me what is likely going to be the aftermath of those actions, how this action is going to be worse on women, and more importantly, how it is going to affect a larger population of women to what is being obtainable, which is something that cannot be overlooked as it regards feminism and the women ideological stance. Based on those things and on these arguments, I gave the win to team proposition. But then it was a very fair debate for me, a slightly above average debate for me, and it was something that makes more sense, and I really enjoyed the round. So that's the end of my OA. If you have any question, you can unmute. Let's talk about it, or I can answer you. If the OA was clear and then everything being okay, we can move to round three. I may not be able to deal with personal feedback. I have to go prepare for round three. As you know, I'm cap, and I have a lot of things. So, but I can do well to respond to questions. So you can ask me any personal feedback. I will try to give it to you in 1 to 2 minutes time before I will leave.
Chair,
Yeah,
feedback for Gov, please.
I can't hear you.
Chair, feedback for Gov.
Okay, feedback. Okay, so for feedback, I just feel like understand why and what the motions expect you to do. Most time, if you're going to defend the status quo as opposition, ensure that you are defending it and then also taking consideration of the vulnerable counterparts of those status quo. Key them into your own argument and show why, at the end of the day, the harms that they may likely be able to deal with, something that they can obviously, something that can always be mitigated against. I think that's the most important thing. Showing how you directly deal with this is something that is very important, and then gives you a better opportunity of how to, debate and respond very well to arguments like this. I think that's what I have to say in terms of that. Any
Thank
other
you, sir.
question? Any other question?
Can we ask the speaks range of this debate?
I already told you it's above average debates, at least from 70 up, 77 and above. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, all right. All the best. Good luck in round three.
Any personal feedback for the leader, the deputy leader of opposition?
For DLO, the only personal feedback I have for you is I love all of your arguments. I love how you talk about the autonomy and all of those things. But then, please try to consider that there are autonomy that has consequences. Fathom how those consequences can be mitigated against, and how that consequence does not in any way affect the existence of the autonomy. For example, women have the autonomy to surrogacy. In situation where poor persons decide to use their body for surrogacy and they become sick or they have health complication, that is a consequence. How are they going to survive because of this particular action and rights to bodily autonomy? I think that are things you need to consider. What are the consequences of those actions? Even though people have that autonomy, how do people get to mitigate against those autonomy that it doesn't affect them so largely and that it doesn't become worse on their path? If you are able to get the reason why consequences and actions can be mitigated against and how to weigh the impact of these consequences of the actions, it could give you a very real margin, and now you can obviously argue better in next round and then be able to articulate your point in such a way that it does not in any way have a larger impact on the proposition side over your side. I think this makes more sense for me. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you.
All right, good luck in round three, everyone. Bye.